everyone. Happy Halloween, and welcome to Field Lab Earth, the podcast that's all about past and present advances in the fields of agronomic, crop, soil, and environmental sciences. Today, we've got a special guest episode with Ellen Weatherford from the Just the Zoo of Us podcast, where we'll be doing a Halloween-themed rating on one of the world's scariest agricultural pests, the locust. As a note up front, we did just want to say that in keeping with the spirit of Just the Zoo of Us, this episode is pretty lighthearted, focusing mostly on the locust and its adaptations on their own outside of human context, though we do talk about their threats to human life and agriculture later in the show. That being said, we do recognize that locusts are still an extreme threat to many around the world today, including those affected by this year's upsurge, which for some are the worst in a generation. To that end, we are going to be including some links to some organizations that are helping combat locust swarms around the world, like the World Bank and the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations, in our show notes. If you'd like to learn more about what these organizations are doing to help or this year's upsurge, please see our show notes for more details. We'd also like to give a quick thanks to our sponsor, Gazmat Technologies, the maker of the GT5000 Terra, the smallest portable FTIR multi-gas analyzer for greenhouse gas and environmental research. Measure carbon dioxide, carbon monoxide, methane, nitrous oxide, nitric oxide, nitrogen dioxide, ammonia, and water vapor in real time simultaneously from static or automated chambers. Visit www.gazmat.com, that's Gazmat spelled G-A-S-M-E-T, or email sales@gazmat.com for more information. Now, it's time to get spooky. I'm your host, Abu Morrison. Let's talk about locusts. Hi everyone, welcome to the show today. We are doing something special for Halloween this year, and we wanted to do a spooky episode about a pest. So today we have Ellen Weatherford with us. She is the co-host of Just the Zoo of Us. And I will let her introduce herself. Ellen, tell us all about yourself and your show.
Thank you, Abby. It's so good to be here. I'm so excited. I love y'all, so I'm really excited to be here sharing with you. So like you mentioned, I do make the podcast Just the Zoo of Us. It is about animals of all types, including the ones that are maybe a little bit problematic. Sometimes maybe they get a bad rep, or maybe they are destructive in some way. So that's kind of the angle we're going at with these, like you mentioned, pest friends. Friends is not the right word. I try to always refer to our animals as friends, but friends doesn't feel like the right word for locusts, does it?
Yeah, I don't. Yeah. I'm not really sure. Like, adversaries.
I was thinking that adversarial is the right word for the nature of our relationship with these animals. What we usually go over on our show is that I myself am not a zoological expert. I'm not an entomologist, but I do a lot of research ahead of time to make sure that the information that I'm presenting is accurate and trustworthy. So I will mention that I got my information today from both National Geographic and also the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations. So that's where my information is coming from. I didn't make it up, I promise.
Great. Good to know. Yeah, your show is great. Always a fun listen, just super relaxing, and such a fun rating system that you have. So can you tell us a little bit more about kind of the structure of your show?
Yeah, definitely. If you've never listened, what we do is we review animals and we give them ratings out of 10 in 3 categories that I'm about to go over for the locust. The 3 categories are effectiveness, which for us is like physical adaptations that the animal has that let it do a good job of the things that it's trying to do. We have ingenuity, which for us is, you could think of it as intelligence, but since intelligence is kind of subjective and hard to measure, these are behavioral adaptations that the animal, like things the animal does with its body to like get an edge over other animals or just survive better, do real good, clever things. The last Usually the last category is aesthetics, which is very self-explanatory. It is just how pleasant the animal is to look at. But this week, since we're doing the spooky business, I have added a fourth category. I will be rating this animal on spookiness, which we do for Halloween. For Halloween, that's a special spooky category. So that's how our show typically works. I will be providing the ratings for the Locust today.
Wonderful. Yeah, that's a great overview. It's a lovely show. I highly suggest everyone go gives it a listen. And hang out with us on Twitter with like Vikram and Varmints and all the other amazing SciComm shows out there, of which there are many.
Squad. Everyone's so nice.
Yeah, it's a very lovely environment. Come hang out with us. We'll be friendly and nice and send stickers. So great. Well, let's launch in here. So why don't we just start by giving kind of a general overview of the locust? Like, what is their deal as an animal?
So I knew very little about locusts before launching into this. I had assumed that locust was another word for cicada. I don't know where I got that idea. It's not even close to true. They're not even close to related.
I mean, they both swarm, right?
Yeah. So swarming is kind of the locust's whole deal. Actually, locusts there's not just one species of locust. There's very many. And the idea of what a locust is that it is a species of short-horned grasshoppers that are migratory and they swarm. So they migrate in large swarms. If they do that, they're a locust.
Okay.
But they're kind of a subset of grasshoppers. So it's kind of like all locusts are grasshoppers, but not all grasshoppers are locusts.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So they're not that big. Grasshoppers can be kind of huge, but these guys are, I saw anywhere from 1/2 inch to 3 inches long, which if you are a metric user, that is 3 to 8 centimeters. And they're found all over the world. So the most notorious is the desert locust, which is found all across northern Africa. They're found in the Arabian Peninsula and then all through the Middle East into like the northern India area. That whole region of the world is populated with these desert locusts. But there's also species just anywhere, right? So like we have locusts here in the United States. They just don't necessarily cause as many problems over here. But we have them. And so they belong to the family of grasshoppers, which is called Acrididae. And this family contains about 11,000 different species. So there's tons and tons of grasshoppers. This is just like a group within those. So that's kind of what a locust is if you don't already know about them. I don't know if I've ever seen one because I probably would have seen one and just said, oh, that's a grasshopper and not really thought much more about it. But yeah, you've probably seen one. They're very common. Just a grasshopper, really, when you just look at them, there's if you aren't the type of person that's very, very knowledgeable about species of grasshoppers and locusts, then you would probably just look at one and be like, oh, yep, that's a grasshopper. Because what sets them apart from other grasshoppers is their behavior. It's that swarming migratory behavior that makes it a locust and not just a regular grasshopper.
Hey science fans, I hope you're enjoying the show. Interested in learning more? We've got links to more resources in our show notes. If you are a certified crop advisor or certified professional soil scientist, you can take a quiz for continuing education units for this episode, which can be found in our show notes or on certifiedcropadvisor.org. Thanks again also to our sponsor Gasmat Technologies. Conduct greenhouse gas flux measurements in the field using the GT5000 Terra. Weighing 20.7 pounds, splash-proof IP54 rated, internal pump and battery, and vibration resistant, the GT5000 Terra is a robust and portable multi-gas analyzer for fieldwork. Visit www.gasmat.com or email sales@gasmat.com for more information. Thank you for being our sponsor. Let's get back to the show. So, yeah, and obviously these swarms are really famous for causing agricultural damage. So I did just want to upfront mention we will talk about that in future. But in keeping with the spirit of Just the Zoo of Us, we also kind of just address the animal on its own outside of maybe more human context up front. But that information is coming. So
yeah, we're getting there.
Yeah. So that being said, let's maybe launch into the ratings. The first one is effectiveness.
Yes, it is. So effectiveness, like I said, is physical adaptations. I'm giving the Locust an 8 out of 10.
Wow.
Which is, it's pretty good. It's pretty good. So like other grasshoppers, locusts are herbivores, meaning that they eat plants. And in order to eat those plants, they have these really interesting mouth parts. So like other... I'm just going to say bugs. People sometimes don't like it when I say bugs, but I'm saying bugs.
Okay.
Because like there's this, there's true bugs that are like a very specific group, but I call all of the little critters bugs. So they have these mouth parts that are called mandibles. So they're like these jaw parts but what's interesting about grasshopper mandibles is that they close from the left and the right sides of the head rather than the top and the bottom, like ours. So like how we have a top jaw and a bottom jaw, they have like a left and a right jaw, and they close towards the middle more like scissors than like how our jaws open and close. I think that sort of thing is really interesting. And they're pointed straight down, right? So if they're sitting on a leaf and they're trying to eat the leaf below them, they just are able to do that without having to like angle their head or anything. It's pretty neat to look at. The mandibles are also kind of like serrated, so it helps them chew up those like really fibrous plants that they eat. Very neat. And also, I didn't know this, but surrounding the mandibles, so like up on the top and bottom of the mandibles, they have these parts called the labrum and the labium. And these act like top and bottom lips to like hold on to the food while the grasshopper chews it up. So when you look at the locust's like face, I guess, you don't see the chompy bits. You don't see the mandibles, like I think they're the spooky parts, the parts that look like scary teeth. You don't see them because they have these like kind of like lips that help them chew their food. So I think stuff like that is really interesting. That's how they're eating their food. It might not be like the sort of thing that you can, you would be able to go outside in your backyard and be able to see, because they would probably hop away from you. But it's very interesting how they eat their food. But another like defining characteristic of not just locusts, but grasshoppers is that they have these really, really big, thick thighs. They got those big hind legs.
Yeah.
So these are naturally for jumping.
Right.
So the legs are really big and they're really muscular, especially for a bug. But power isn't all it takes to lift off into the air like they do, because they get some serious jumps, right?
Yeah, they do.
They're like getting way up in the air. But for a good launch, you need not just strength, but speed, right? Because you can push off as hard as you want, but if it's not fast enough, you're not going anywhere. So the way that they do this is really, really interesting. They have these joints in the knees only of their back legs, and these joints work like springs. So it stores energy when the legs are flexed in. So like they have to squeeze their back legs like together, and then when they release the tension in that little springy joint, it quickly extends and sends the grasshopper flying. So that like action of like contracting the leg is what causes the tension, and then they release it like a catapult to just yeet themselves into the air.
I'm imagining like those like workout things that you just squeeze with your hand. Do you know what I'm talking about? Kind of like that.
So like you have to put the effort in to close it, but then when you let go, it springs back.
That's awesome. I didn't know
Yeah,
that.
it's very cool. And it's very effective because they can get very far. And what's really funny is that it's not just for jumping, they can also be used for self-defense. So if the grasshopper feels threatened, it can just, like, rather than aiming its legs at the ground, it just aims its legs at its attacker and does the same, like, you know, catapult motion and kicks its attacker in the face, and then, you know, hopefully that grants it enough time to escape. So therefore they're really great for jumping, but they're also really great for kicking dudes in the teeth.
Okay, I feel that it is important that there is, like, at some point there needs to be a grasshopper themed superhero, because that's an awesome power. That's just amazing.
Yeah, that's like, that would be like the ultimate leg day themed superhero, that just, maybe they have just like the most incredible muscular, like, giant legs you've ever seen in your life. And like the rest of the body is like a normal human body. Maybe that's their superpower.
I'm imagining they're a speed skater by day and vigilante by night, because speed skaters have very impressive, like, muscular thighs.
Oh, that would be awesome. Like, if their whole getup was like, if they were like a night vigilante and they had like light up roller skates and
Yes.
a whole, I'm thinking of like Lucio from Overwatch. Definitely would be a good leg day themed superhero for grasshoppers in general. That would be a really cool. I don't know if grasshoppers are intimidating enough for Marvel and or DC to decide that it warrants a superhero, but like, come on, Spider's got
Ant-Man
one,
and the Tick, Spider-Man. Like, there's plenty of, like, insectoid themed superheroes.
I know
we can make it happen.
The grasshopper would fit right in.
I love it.
So another thing that grasshoppers have that I think our superhero could have, or you know what, he would be a villain, a super villain. If we're talking about locusts,
oh yeah,
he would be a super villain, I bet. But so they do actually also have wings. Like, yeah, they can jump, but they can actually also like actually fly. So they do have wings that can allow them to fly, which is very important for locusts. I don't know how important it is for grasshoppers, but I do know that typically, like around here, at least where our grasshoppers are quite large, the grasshoppers will just like jump away and then that's all you see of them. but they can fly. Some people just think that they can only jump, but they can also fly, which is, you know, pretty good for them, because I guess the reason I gave them an 8 out of 10 is that other than like evasion, they don't have a lot of like defensive capabilities. I think that some grasshoppers have like chemical defenses where they can like spit a chemical of some sort, but I'm pretty sure locusts do not have that. That is not a thing that they have.
Yeah, I can speak to that only experientially and not on any kind of scientific level. But ours up here are a lot smaller than what you're describing, but they almost look like, when they fly, they almost look like moths or butterflies. So it's very easy to get them confused. So we have that. And then, yeah, if you go out and are just, you know, catching them as a kid or whatever, they can definitely be a little unpleasant on your hands.
Yeah, ours are huge down here. Ours are like, I don't know how big I would say they are, like maybe usually around 3 to 4 inches long, I think.
That is quite large.
We have huge grasshoppers. And so I don't think I've seen them fly, because I think if I would have seen it fly, I probably would have either passed out immediately or just repressed the memory, because those things are huge. But also I feel like they probably don't need to fly very often, because like that's very energy taxing. And if you can just jump and get the same results, like just do that. You don't need to sustain flight. But locusts do need to sustain flight because they travel for these really long distances, which is what I'm about to get into actually right now in Ingenuity.
Perfect.
So Ingenuity, like I said earlier, is like behavioral things that the animal does to accomplish its goals. And I'm giving the locust a 9 out of 10 for Ingenuity, because the behavior of the locust is kind of its whole deal. So though you can often find locusts literally flying solo, just like chilling on their own, They're just doing their own thing. The thing that they're most known for is swarming, right? You cannot separate the concept of a locust from a swarm. So this behavior of getting together in a big posse and flying around is usually prompted by an environmental shift. So like a dry season comes along, and that causes vegetation to become more like fragmented and patchy, right? So like you could have food sources that are only available in small patches that are far apart from each other. So, when they're searching for food, lots of locusts have to enter a small area at once. So once they've all come into the small area searching for food, they kind of have to start playing nice with each other. Whereas like maybe before, when they were doing their own thing, if they came across another locust, they'd be like, no thanks. And they would kind of leave each other alone. Now they have no choice. They have to be friends. So then they go through this really dramatic shift in behavior that is so like all encompassing that their body transforms. So they actually shift into this different phase of their life cycle called the gregarious phase. So gregarious is a word meaning friendly and sociable, but it is also the word used to refer to like the specific like stage of the locust's life that is marked by actual noticeable physical changes.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So their colors change, which is like the most noticeable thing. So normally when they're in their solitary phase, they're like a kind of like a drab green to brown, like very like camouflagey sort of colors. So when they shift into the gregarious phase, they turn bright, bright, bright yellow and black, like super high contrasting, very noticeable. Like it's a much more like intimidating look, I think, but more noticeable. So they also turn larger, they move more quickly, and the most important part of this is that they seek other locusts out rather than avoiding them like they would in their solitary phase. So this is when they start being like, okay, now I'm in this phase of my life where I'm trying to group up with other locusts, like actively looking for each other. And this is when the problems start.
Yeah.
So, and what's interesting about this is that these changes, like these physical changes in their body, are brought on by their nervous system. They don't have the same sort of like brain and everything that humans would, but they do have a central nervous system, and it produces more of the hormone serotonin than it usually does, which is probably a familiar word because we also produce serotonin, is the same hormone. But so their nervous system produces more serotonin, which causes all of these physical changes and also these behavioral changes. So when they're in this gregarious phase, since they're seeking each other out, they're reproducing a lot. Like a lot. So they're making more and more locusts when they've already been, packed into a small area. So this makes the swarm bigger and denser, which then means there's less available food. So they need to go find more. So they'll take flight in a swarm, and this swarm could be as many as 80 million individuals. And just these millions and millions of locusts will all band together, take off, and fly out in search of food. And they will fly for days on end looking for food. So once they find it, they just kind of descend on it, eat everything in sight, and then move on to find more. They'll even cross seas. Like they regularly cross the Red Sea to find food. Sometimes they try flying out into the ocean to like try to get somewhere. I read that they were able to make it one time from West Africa to the Caribbean. Wow. So they were able to make it that far. I guess it took them like 10 days. But the thing is, that's a very difficult journey for them to make, because once they run out of food, they will start to turn on each other. So they will actually turn cannibalistic if they can't find food soon enough. So that's why I docked them a point, because they don't always go the right way. And so they don't exactly find food in time, and sometimes have to turn on each other. It's not great. It's not smart of them, but they will go really far. And so like this endurance, this like ability to fly for such long periods of time is another one of those physical changes brought on by the gregarious phase. So like that's something they can do because they're in that like group up mode.
Oh my gosh, that is wild. That is certainly a supervillain vibe to have like your minion swarm and like transform into something other.
Yeah, so like maybe our like rollerblading vigilante, like maybe in the daytime he wears like drab office attire, and then at night he takes it off to show you his yellow and black spandex flashy suit.
Here's what I'm thinking. Superhero grasshopper, speed skater, super villain Locust, and they're intense rivals because, like all good supervillain superhero combos, they see part of themselves in the other.
Yes.
And are just two sides of the same coin.
Yes, and their final battle is a 1v1 roller derby.
Yes. Absolutely.
And yes, so and also like part of it could be like maybe the supervillain leads his minions like down the wrong path, and then they all have to turn on each other, and so like his minions have all like defeated each other, and now it's just him, and he has to face off with the grasshopper. I've got this whole thing written out of my head now.
I feel like they're breaking the rules of the roller derby by having more players than they should, and then they end up just taking themselves out.
Yeah, it just breaks into chaos, and
man,
there's a big there's got to be some lasers involved, I think, maybe some like fun lights, and it would be very
solid.
So that's the gregarious phase of the locust. So when you're thinking of like the locust swarm, that's what's going on. They're not always like that. And here's the crazy thing. They can shift back and forth between the phases. So like a locust could, they could be born like in this gregarious phase and then later on switch to solitary and switch back. Like they can go back and forth. It can happen at any point in their life cycle. Like you can have a little baby locust that has just hatched and they can switch over. And then once they've switched, they can switch back. It's no big deal. Like it's just something that they're able to like activate and reactivate at will, like not at will, I guess, because it does depend on like external triggers, but it's something that it's not to say that like, oh yeah, now you're in your gregarious phase, this is your life now.
Yeah.
Like they can go back and forth, which I think is really interesting.
How do they get smaller if they switch back? Is it just like muscle mass, or like what's going on with that?
I have no idea. I mean, I know that like there's a gradual shift that takes place over like a day or two, like a couple of days, I think. Because like if a locust is like around a bunch of other locusts for like a period of time, there will be like early gregarious phase, and then like it sort of like gradually phases in. I know that in other like arthropods, there's kind of like when they change forms when they molt, right?
Yeah.
Like some of them will molt and then shed their their what is it the chitin?
Exos? Oh yeah.
Like they'll shed it, and then once they molt, then they're different underneath. So I don't know, maybe that is it. I didn't look too much into like the mechanics by which they switch between these phases. But I think it's very interesting that it is something that they can go back and forth between, that it's more like the Hulk, I guess, that you can go Hulk mode and then shift back down to Bruce. It's Banner, right? Bruce Banner.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really cool. So, they're not in that swarming phase for their entire life cycle. It is just the one that clashes with human activity the most frequently. So that's the one that we know the most about.
Sure.
So that's what I had for ingenuity. And then the last category that we rate animals on is aesthetics. I gotta be honest, I'm giving them a 3 out of 10. This is a no for me.
Okay.
This is not a good one. I don't think. I like, especially the solitary phase, which has like, it's not cute, and also has ugly colors, and like the Gregarious Phase, like, yeah, sure, they have the cool yellow and black colors, but it's still not, it doesn't help that much. Like they're still kind of grody looking, especially it's something about the face I'm not into. I think lots of bugs are cute. I think lots of insects are cute. I think lots of them have a nice face, but this is not among them. This is not a cute one.
Okay. I thought maybe the short horns would like give it a little bit of a boost.
Nothing. I got nothing for them. I got no love.
All right. Fair enough.
And finally, of course, is the spooky rating. This gets a good 8 out of 10.
Oh no.
There are literal horror movies about locusts. I'm not a horror movie buff, so like I couldn't think of any off the top of my head. And when I Googled like locust horror movies, they were like, "Oh, you mean Locust?" I was like, "Yeah, I guess."
Okay.
But there are literal horror movies about swarms of locusts, and it's exactly what you think. It's just exactly what you would expect from that. But so I think if an animal has its own horror movies about them, it like that grants a pretty good spooky rating already right off the gate.
Yeah, that's fair.
So
that's,
yeah. I mean, so what I figure contributes to its spookiness is how destructive that they are, and it's, you know, these swarms of locusts are so dense that they move in like a big, like a black cloud, right? Like they shift with like as they move like as one, and it is very scary looking to see it because of how many there are. So you know, these swarms of locusts have been agricultural pests for pretty much as long as there has been agriculture. So there have been plagues of locusts mentioned in the Old Testament of the Bible, the Quran, the Iliad, and on the walls of Egyptian pyramids. They all depict these swarms of locusts. So this is something that humans have been grappling with pretty much forever. This is not a recent feud. This is an eternal beef.
Yeah.
So the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United States, they operate what's called a locust watch. So they monitor locust populations and provide updates on their activity and tell you like, oh, they have different words for like how active a certain population is. So they'll say like, this over here is like an uprising of locusts, and like keep an eye on it. Don't know what they're going to do. And they'll let people know, you know, okay, locusts are starting to swarm over here. You need to get ready. So they'll give people kind of a heads up so that farmers in these areas have time to prepare, which I think I saw that it usually takes the form of spraying pesticides and using a fungus, like using fungal spores that attack insects.
Oh.
Yeah. I don't know too much about that. I don't know very much about fungi. I'm sorry, I don't know. But so they give them this heads up that's like, hey, you've got locusts coming your way. Do something about it before they get there, basically. So that has helped a lot.
Yeah. Wow, that's so interesting. I wonder how did it say anything about how they track them? Like, is it, you know, like some things you can see just like from like weather radar will just pick up like big flocks and stuff, or is it just?
I believe they use planes.
Okay.
I saw that they use like, I think they have 4 airplanes, and they fly out. It's not like a, you know, real time minute by minute update. Cause when I looked today actually, and the most recent like update they had on there was from, I don't know, within a week, or maybe about a week before I checked it today. So it's not like a constantly updating thing, but I believe that they said that they send out like 4 different planes that just fly out and they just look. I'm assuming that they use some sort of complicated surveying equipment that I don't know anything about, but they actually like fly out over these areas and look to see what the locusts are doing so that it doesn't devastate too much agricultural activity around there, because it still does happen, particularly in like remote areas where they might not have access to this information, or they might not even have the means to get the sort of preparation that they need. So, you know, it still happens on the regular. locusts are still doing their job as far as they're concerned. They're still getting out there and getting food, which, when it's scraping against human agriculture is when the problems arise, because there you go. Now, your entire harvest is gone. Now locusts, here's something interesting that I didn't know. Locusts are edible. And not only are they edible, but they're good sources of protein, and people eat them all over the world. They eat them. Yeah. I've obviously never eaten a locust. It's not a common practice where I live. But in other parts of the world where locusts are more common, yeah, they'll just fry them up, smoke them, dry them, do whatever, and just eat them. I saw them referred to as sky prawns.
What?
Yeah, like I guess they have sort of a shellfishy sort of flavor. So
really?
People like to eat them. I think that's a great way of making lemonade out of 80 million lemons that have fallen on you from the sky. So kind of the idea was like, okay, well, they came in and ate all of our crops, so I guess we'll just eat them now. Yeah,
that's definitely an effective solution.
Like, I
didn't know about that.
I didn't either until I was looking around. I was like, what's all these recipes for fried locust? Apparently they're pretty tasty if you like that sort of thing. I don't like shellfish. I don't like any seafood at all. So I don't think I would like it. But yeah, there you go. You can just crunch on them. And now that is to say that since, the prevention methods for locusts do include using pesticides and using these fungus spores, is that those pesticides that are used to quell those swarms can make them unsafe for consumption. If, say you go out and spray your field and then locusts come in and you eat you don't necessarily want to be eating the ones that were just killed off by your, pesticide chemicals. Right. But yeah, it's still, people still eat them all the time, and they're very common little snacks, I guess. You just pop one in your mouth and eat it, and it's no big deal. I've never eaten a bug. I would not be opposed to trying it, but I saw that, I know that crickets are a very common little snack. Which I wouldn't be opposed to trying it. I've never been in a position where it was feasible for me to try them. But so crickets are related to grasshoppers and locusts, but more distantly. They're in a different family. So, but yeah, locusts, you can it's like little popcorn. It's like a little popcorn snack. You can just get a bag of fried locusts and eat them if you want to. Which I'm like, hey, yeah, that's resourceful. If they're going to come in and wipe out your crops, you might as well get some use out of them.
Yeah. You heard it here first, folks. Please send Ellen crickets to try.
It will probably be overkill, because I imagine if you sent me a bag of them, I would probably just try one of them and throw the rest away.
What if you find out you love them, though?
I feel like that's unlikely, because I am a quite picky eater already. Okay. I'm already kind of, choosy about what I eat. I bet Christian would love them, though. Well, I don't know, but love is a strong word for it. He would probably be okay with them. He is not a picky eater, and he likes shellfish. So, yeah, I would imagine that he would probably like them more than me. I don't think probably enough to eat a whole bag or whatever quantity that they come in. But I bet he would at least be open to trying. We do have we do have a lollipop that a friend sent me from Arizona that has a scorpion in it. And Christian said he was going to eat it, and he hasn't done it yet. So I don't know, maybe the pressure's on. Maybe it's time to crank up the heat and be like, all right, it's time to eat the scorpion lollipop.
Yeah. I feel like I know you can get I'm also going to use the word bugs, so I'm sorry. But I know you can get the little mealworms or other kinds of things in just they're raisin box size. So I feel like you could maybe get one of those, and that would be more reasonable to try it without wasting a bunch of stuff.
I did sell when I worked at a pet store, I did sell these things. I sold crickets, and I sold the mealworms and the superworms and stuff like that. but I sold them live. And really thinking about it, the smell of the cricket bin was enough to make me never really want to try to eat crickets in my life. Just smelling what they smelled like in that bin was really not pleasant. But I sold them, and crickets, you could go and say you just wanted one cricket, but they would definitely do that. And you would pay like, I don't know what it was, like 6 cents or something like that. You could just get one cricket and like try it. I wonder if you asked them for a free sample, I wonder what kind of look they would give you if you asked for a free sample of one cricket.
I don't know. I imagine it would be similar to the look you would have given them if you worked at a pet store.
I would have said, please leave immediately. Get out of here. But that's all I had on Locust. Yeah, they are a supervillain, especially, in their swarming phase, which is just, it's fascinating how it works. Yes, it is the worst thing ever. It's horrible. But it's very interesting. I think it's really cool how like the context of their behavior has such noticeable physical changes. We've talked about a lot of animals. We just put out episode 70, and we talk about different animals every single episode. And I don't feel like I've ever talked about an animal who like changes its entire body based on the behavior it's exhibiting. It's very interesting. I think it's unique to Locust. So very fascinating animal. I'm trying to refrain from calling it a friend like I normally do with our animals, because I don't think that they have been quite so friendly towards us. We've been at war for thousands and thousands of years, but still an interesting animal. Not very cute, though.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for being on the show. We will find some more resources for people who are interested. If you are a locust expert and would like to be on the show, let us know. But yeah, you mentioned you have just launched episode 70. That is a huge accomplishment, because I think you've only been doing this a little bit more than a year. So that is wonderful. Where can people get a hold of you, get a hold of your show, anything like that?
Yeah, sure. We have been going since May of 2019. So we're kind of young, but we do weekly episodes, so we get pretty up there pretty quick. But yeah, I am most active on Twitter, which is at Just the Zoo of Us. We also have a Facebook group, which is really fun as well. It's just the Zoo of Us official friend squad on Facebook is our group, which is very delightful. We're on Instagram as well. I'm a little less active on there because I don't understand it, but you can always come hang out with us, come be our buddy. We're very friendly. As far as like listening, we're on all the major podcatchers, right? Like iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher. Is that one of them? Yep. Pretty much all the major ones. You can find it. We have a website. We're at justthezooofus.com. And that has like a link page to all the different places you can listen. Like Abby said, if you are a locust expert, please feel free to @ me. I promise I'm nice. If I got something like egregiously wrong, please feel free to call me out on it. I will appreciate it. Like I said, I'm most active on Twitter. So come hang out with us on there. And we like to hang out with all of our other natural science communications buddies like Abby and like Vikram and Paul and all of them. So we're we just like to have friends.
Indeed. The characteristic we share with locusts.
Yes, I would say that I too am in my gregarious phase.
Fair. Great. Well, thank you so much for being on the show. We really appreciate you taking the time.
No problem. I appreciate you having me. This has been so much fun. Thank you, Abby.
Absolutely. Thank you for listening to Field Lab Earth. You'll find a link to today's paper and other resources for this episode in our show notes or on our website. If you have any questions, comments, or recommendations for show topics, please contact us at podcast@sciencesocieties.org or on Twitter @FieldLabEarth. If you'd like to hear more content like this, please subscribe and don't forget to rate and review us on Apple Podcasts, Podchaser, Stitcher, or anywhere else you find your podcast if you like our show. We are also available on Lyceum, the world's first audio learning community, where you can join our discussion group and comment on each episode. This podcast is a joint production of the American Society of Agronomy, Crop Science Society of America, and Soil Science Society of America. Special thanks to Lobo Loco for the use of their song Spook Castle on the intro and outro of our show. Opinions and conclusions expressed by authors are their own and are not considered as those of the American Society of Agronomy, Crop Science Society of America, Soil Science Society of America, its staff, its members, or its advertisers.